What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Show, where I, Graham Jason Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network and Peacock. Today we're talking the April 27, 2024 edition of the SmackDown LowDown. Now, I mentioned the other day, this edition of SmackDown LowDown, this episode specifically, coming out of the draft, is like the one must-see edition of the show all year. Because in years past, last year, and even when they were doing the draft in October, a few years ago, they would typically do the supplemental picks on SmackDown LowDown and Raw Talk. That wasn't the case this year. I probably should have known that when Megan Morant made a comment during Raw Talk, I think a couple days ago, saying that Sam Roberts would be hosting SmackDown LowDown on Saturday, breaking down the draft, and I'm thinking, that's odd. Why would Sam Roberts be doing it on his own? And she made some sort of comment at the end of that show just indicating that. He did host this show by himself. He did it from his home studio. Roberts is fine, nothing against Roberts. I've enjoyed his work in the past. His podcast stuff and the stuff he does with WWE is pretty good. But this had no supplemental picks. WWE announced the rest of the eligible draft pool and where they ended up, Raw or SmackDown, and including one NXT call-up, quote-unquote. It was a main roster star returning to the main roster. They announced all of that on WWE.com and WWE socials right after SmackDown was over last night. So there was absolutely nothing worth watching from the show. It was a pretty standard edition of the SmackDown LowDown. When the episode started and I saw Roberts in his home studio, I'm thinking, are we going to have any interviews? Is it just going to be him running down the draft for 30 fucking minutes? Thankfully, they did have the typical backstage interviews. They had Carmelo Hayes. They had WWE Women's Champion Bayley. Even the WWE Tag Team Champions, Austin Theory and Grayson Waller. So they had some notable names lined up for, the interviews. But this had nothing worth going out of your way to see. And that's always the case with SmackDown LowDown. But I'm thinking the one episode of the year that it's actually worth watching, and I knew when I was going to watch it this morning, they already announced the picks last night. But when they announced the picks last night, I'm thinking they're not even waiting. And that's fine. But it's you have this show for a reason, why not use it? Because I thought that was a good idea they did last year and in years past, where they announced the supplemental picks on the show. Now, they also used it as an opportunity last year to declare people as free agents, like Ali and Dolph, because they went undrafted, because they were fucking losers at that point, booking-wise. No one declaring free agency. Everyone did end up somewhere, and I talked all about the picks, including the supplemental picks, in my SmackDown audio review from earlier. So you can check that out for the complete draft analysis. Robert's not really giving anything away here that we didn't already know. So, just a heads up. If you came into the show, and why would anyone look forward to SmackDown LowDown? No one really watches the show to begin with, I'm sure, beyond my fucking dumbass. But if you were coming into this episode expecting, supplemental picks, you missed them. They were announced last night. Nothing of consequence was announced on this show. And they didn't even run down the supplemental picks. He probably recorded this after SmackDown last night and didn't wait until those picks were made to discuss them. Because he made no mention of people like Corbin getting called up again from NXT to the main roster, or Ivar staying put on Raw, or Alba Fire and Isla Dawn going to Raw, whatever. So, I spoke all about those in depth to a certain degree. We're going to go more in depth on WrestleRant Radio next week. But I spoke about all the picks in SmackDown itself in the SmackDown audio review earlier, so if you want my full thoughts on that, check out that video. But for this show, Roberts, again, hosting alone from the home studio. I don't know where Megan Morant, obviously she wasn't going to be in the fucking home studio, but I'm not sure why they didn't do what they normally do by hosting this show in the regular studio. I don't know why he did it from home. Maybe this is going to be a regular thing going forward, I'm not sure. But he ran down the round one picks, talked about the protected champions and the champions not being eligible to be drafted, which I like. They replayed the Naomi Tiffany Stratton match, the number one contenders match for the WWE Women's Championship, ending in a no contest. Nia Jax getting involved. It will be Bayley, Naomi, and Tiffany in a triple threat at Backlash for the championship. We hear from Bayley after the fact, and Bayley says backstage with Byron, she says that she should have had eyes in the back of her head because Nia attacked her from the crowd during that match on SmackDown, and she should have seen that one coming. She feels hurt but humbled from the attack, says that Nia Jax might ruin the triple threat too, who knows, but that Tiffany made a bold statement with her attack last week in the showing that she had on SmackDown, and she says that she and Nia are not done yet. So making it pretty obvious Bayley's probably retaining that championship at Backlash to set up her and Nia Jax for right after Backlash for that championship, I would have to imagine. They run down the round two picks. Roberts, I say they, I mean Sam Roberts. I'm used to saying they because Megan's usually there, not on this show. But he runs down the round 2 picks. They replay the Bloodline, Kevin Owens, Randy Orton segment from SmackDown, hype up the Backlash tag team match with Randy Orton and Kevin Owens taking on Solo Sikoa and Tama Tonga, calling Braun Breaker the steal of the night, saying that, he acknowledged even that Nick Aldis spent weeks trying to sign Braun Breaker to a SmackDown contract, and he went to Raw anyway. So hopefully Jade Cargill stays on SmackDown, so Nick Aldis' efforts weren't for nothing. But he's right, though. Roberts isn't wrong that Braun Breaker was a big signing for SmackDown, and he goes to Monday night. So why even make those people eligible? I guess if they didn't make those people eligible, you would have had even less names that in the pool than we already did, and people were already complaining about not enough people switching shows and whatnot, so whatever. He runs down the round 3 picks, hypes up Theory and Waller against the Profits for the WWE Tag Team titles on SmackDown in France, just as I expected, coming up on SmackDown next week. We hear from Waller and Theory backstage, I think with Byron Saxton. Waller says that France sucks, doesn't want to go to France, but they're going to have to. Theory says the Profits are always up and they're always down. It's never really consistent with them, but they do intend to remain undefeated as tag team champions, albeit they haven't had a match yet as tag team champions, but they intend to remain undefeated as tag team champions. Robert says the Profits can live up to their full potential next week by winning that match. I don't know where he was coming from with that. It's not as if the Profits have not had success. They were former NXT Tag Team Champions, but even on the main roster, they were pretty long-running Raw and SmackDown Tag Team Champions. So the idea that, they haven't lived up to their full potential, granted they haven't held gold in over 3 years, but still, what is he fucking talking about? They've been on the main roster now for almost 5 years, and it hasn't, it's not like they haven't lived up to their full potential as a top team. They've been a top team on Raw and SmackDown this entire time, so I'm not really sure where he's coming from with that. But he runs down the round 4 picks as well, replaying the contract signing between AJ Styles and Cody Rhodes at the start of SmackDown, hyping Cody Rhodes versus AJ Styles for the Undisputed WWE Championship at Backlash. Also replaying Cody Rhodes versus Carmelo Hayes from the SmackDown main event. We hear from Carmelo Hayes with Byron Saxton backstage. He says that he made a statement with his showing on SmackDown, being drafted in the first round, and Byron says he was the highest draftee for an NXT star ever. Now, Finn Balor, I know, was in the first round of the as an NXT star in the 2016 draft, but he might have been a little bit lower than Carmelo. If Balor, I think, was the 3rd pick, as I think he was for Raw in that draft, then Carmelo was the 2nd one for SmackDown, so Carmelo would have him beat, but I would have to go back and check. I'm pretty sure Finn Balor was the last pick for Raw in that first round, if I'm not mistaken, which would have made him the 3rd pick, because that was back when they were doing 3 picks for Raw, 2 for SmackDown. But anyway, Hayes says that he's destined for greatness and calls SmackDown, or says that SmackDown, they had a lot of opportunities to pick any one of them from the locker room. They picked him. And then back in his studio, Sam Roberts hypes up next week's Cody Rhodes and AJ Styles face-off and also previews the Night 2 eligible draft pool. Pretty uneventful episode here. The interviews were good, but I expected some supplemental picks. They made all of them on SmackDown. Not on SmackDown, but after SmackDown was over on WWE social media. So, no real surprise there. If you caught that stuff, then nothing new from this episode. And if you didn't, then surprise, there were supplemental picks made, not on this show, but I talked all about them in my SmackDown audio review from earlier. Like I said, go out of your way to check it out. I talk all about each of the draft picks there. Thank you guys for checking out my review. I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. I don't know if this is the regular format going forward. I wouldn't think so. I don't know why they went with this format compared to what they normally do. Didn't really make much of a difference, but it would have been nice if they did the supplemental picks on this show to make it more eventful for the one show out of the year, but I guess they couldn't even do that. I don't know about Raw Talk on Monday, because I feel like if they announce the supplemental picks again on social media, that's while Raw Talk is going on. Raw Talk is typically live after Raw every Monday night. So why wouldn't they just make the supplemental picks there? They probably will. This one's not live, that might be why they didn't do it. Maybe on Raw, or Raw Talk rather, they'll actually have these supplemental picks announced. Time will tell. We'll find out on Monday with Scott Stanford and Megan Morant breaking it down. Have a great one, guys. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.